Hello again. Welcome to week 9. We're going to go over some career development and performance appraisal specifics. Performance management should be ongoing. It shouldn't just be a once a year conversation that you have with your team or with that your manager has with you. It should be constant and timely. There's a 1 minute rule. You should discipline within 1 minute of the activity and only for 1 minute. You should coach and praise within 1 minute of activity and for only 1 minute. It's actually called The 1 Minute Manager. It's a pretty interesting book. And although it's not realistic, it is an interesting concept that you want to be in the moment. I mean, it's much less impactful if I'm like, hey, last week when you did this, it was really nice, because you might not even remember doing it. So trying to catch people both good and bad when small coaching moments happen is really quite helpful. Okay, so we talked about learning last. Okay, so some performance appraisals, best practices. The Matt, who is a friend of mine from Harley-Davidson, we used to say this all the time. If your performance appraisal is a surprise, your manager should be fired, which goes back to what I was just saying, that you should be having ongoing discussions. Your team should always know where they are, and you guys can read through these ideas. But the one that I want to point out is the past appraisal should not influence current appraisals, because you might have a really excellent employee that had a bad review cycle, whether it's a quarter, a year. And you might have a really bad employee that's turning it around, and you need to try to remove your bias from it and have a just looking at within the scope of this performance appraisal, which is much easier said than done. Okay, so here are for some of the negatives. For each problem addressed, you need to give 2 concrete examples with dates, which is why you need to document everything, which I've mentioned repeatedly throughout this course. Document, document, document. It's really hard in the moment to be like, well, you always do this. Oh, really? When do I do this? I cannot think of an example right now because I'm in the moment. So you really want to have those examples and dates written down somewhere. So when you do the performance appraisal and you can say, hey, we have a problem with tardiness on these 13 different days, you were at least 15 minutes late. Comment on the problem, not the person. Maybe you need to change your situation. Maybe you need to change your morning routine to get here to work on time. And not, well, you're just a lazy person who can't spend your time correctly. It puts them on the defensive, and it's not going to be a helpful conversation. Agree to follow-up plans and next steps. So what are we going to do? Fix this? How can I help you? What should be the timelines? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? And you really just make sure that you have next steps so you're on the same page. This 4th bullet gets a little heated in human resources, but I'm a firm believer. You go over everything and then you discuss it. What happens is this next bullet, sometimes they get emotional, good, bad, just confused, and you don't get through the whole performance appraisal, which means you're having issues of a technical thing. So I'm just going to go through it all, and then we can discuss any points of clarity, because they're going to be parts of the performance appraisal that there's nothing to talk about. You needed to do 5 projects this term. You did 4. It's the number. Now, the reason for that, okay, let's discuss the reason for that. But the number itself, it is what it is. If they become too emotional during the meeting, you do want to follow up. When somebody's really upset, crying or angry, they're not hearing you anymore, and you're not going to be as effective giving them feedback and advice. So it usually is helpful to follow up an hour later, a day later, depending on the person. Hopefully you know them, and do that. And this employees should have points prepared as well. Here at MSLE, we have to do our performance appraisal, and then our manager does our performance appraisal, and then we compare them. And I do think that is really a best practice. The employee should not be coming in with nothing prepared. It's their review. They should have stuff prepared. And then discuss career potential and pathing. Where do you want to go? Okay, I think you're actually a pretty good match for that. The one thing you're missing is this. How can we help you get there? And those sorts of conversations. Not to mention, if you tell your manager where you want to go, then they can keep a lookout for you and give you advice and maybe even make some connections for you. This question is a really interesting one that I wish we could discuss, but we're in an asynchronous week or completely online, depending on which class you're in. But the idea is, if your career, should you be managing it, or should the organization be managing it and knowing where we want you to go and how we want you to get there? So the corporate view is it's a good coaching tool. If I know where you want to go and where we want you to go, it's really good to have those discussions. Hey, you said you wanted to go into a management role. This would be a really good stretch task for you to take on this project lead. It also helps us with some of our planning and forecasting, which is really critical at the higher levels of company. At lower levels, it sometimes still can be if you're a pivotal position, but as you get higher, there's less redundancy, so we really need to know what's happening. From a personal point of view, you need to be open to feedback. So if you're telling me that you want to go into a management path and I do not see you have any strong human skills, interpersonal skills, you might be very skilled at what you do, a very great nurse, a great teacher, a great engineer. But when it comes to human interpersonal managing people, I don't see it. You need to be able to hear that so I can then tell you, here's how we fix it. You also need to know how your skills will align with another position. It's not always known to you before you get into a position what skills are needed, so it can help that way as well. You might also go seeking mentors. I have a couple different mentors at any given time. I have one that helps me with, how do you balance being a parent and a worker? I want to commit to my job, but I want to commit to my family. How do I do that? And then also, I know where I want to go, and it can help me steer the conversation. Maybe I don't want to be a manager. Maybe I want to stay on the subject matter expertise path. And most companies have a very ladder-like. You're going to be an independent contributor. You're going to be a supervisor. You're going to be a manager, a director. And you're like, I don't want to manage other people and all their stuff. I just really like teaching, as an example for me. And I want to stay in the classroom. I don't want to become a dean or an administrator. I have no interest in any of that. I just want to stay in the classroom. So if they don't know that, they might be grooming me for the wrong thing from my personal point of view. Okay, so one of your discussions this week is about programs. These are the programs. So training pieces might fit into these larger programs. So succession planning is usually the top 2, maybe 3 layers of the company. If the CEO leaves, who do we have internally that can take his place? I actually have a model I'm going to show you from a company on just that. We might have high potential programs, and high potential for this is we think we can promote this person 2 times within 2 years, which is really high potential. High performer is just that. They're doing above and beyond. Sometimes these are reward programs. Sometimes these are training programs. We want to know what they're doing. How are they so high performing so we can duplicate it? Leadership development programs, if you've had the option to be part of these programs, they're really fantastic and they might even stack. So maybe you do a leadership development program because they think you're going to become a leader, and then you do a management development program, director, executive, and so on. And they last, 3 months, 6 months. The executive programs that I'm familiar with last a year or so. Those were all internal. Maybe we cannot help you, so we give you tuition reimbursement. We need you to go get skills at a college or facility that we can't provide. Here's $5,000. Best of luck to you. Same thing with professional development. Maybe it's not college. Maybe it's you need to go to a seminar in your field or a conference, which is the next bullet. So we just give you some money and send you to these programs so you can learn what we need you to do so you can develop in your career. Here's the big drawback. We spend about $14 billion a year, which when you do the math is $150,000 per person per year. And we still think we have gaps. We still think we're missing opportunities. And we don't know why we have that poor return on investment. So McKinsey, who does a lot of research on this, looked and said, well, why are we failing? Well, they lack context. Have you ever taken a class or went to a program or training and you're like, I have no idea how this can help me in my job at all? So we didn't explain the why we're giving you this, the where you are now to where you want to go. This is why it's helpful. Other things are not applicable to your life. So you understand how it relates, but you have no idea how you're going to apply this esoteric theory to your actual job. This third one, I would say, is probably the single largest one. So there's an idea of, do you know if your team can't do it or won't do it, which are 2 totally different problems. If they don't understand how to do it, that's one training. If they do not want to do it, that is a different training. So we see a lot of companies that are trying to train a problem that is not the actual problem. I need a training on written communication. I send emails, my team sends emails, but we're still missing deadlines and we're still having issues. That may or may not be an email problem. You really might not be able to explain your points well in email. My guess would be, though, it's more team-based communication, trust-based. When I say communication, I don't mean written communication. I mean things like they never do what they're going to say. I'm not even going to do anything until they show me results. That guy's such a liar. I'm not even going to engage in what he's talking about. So different conversation where if I actually just put together a training program on how to write emails and get your points across using bullets and being effective, and they're still like, yeah, but Bob's still dumb. I'm not doing what he said. I didn't fix the problem and I wasted everyone's time. The last one, failing to measure results. We do a training just for the sake of being able to say, hey, we did a training on that, and we don't measure results. We don't change behaviors. We don't look for desired long lasting outcomes, which is something that a lot of companies, we're not very good at. All right. So Rexnord is a company that I used to do a lot of work with, and needless to say, but I'm going to say it anyways, everything you're about to see is confidential, and if I find out you share it, I will write you up for academic integrity issues and ask that you be removed from the college. Confidential. Say it one more time. Confidential, not for sharing. Okay, moving on. All right, so everyone at Rexnord gets a performance review. You meet with your manager, they tell you how you're doing, what you're doing, and you guys have a great meeting. Managers and above, we give another layer of analyzing for. We want to know your profile, which we're going to get into. We want to know your 9-box, which we're going to get into. And we want to know specifically what skills you have that we need to develop, which again, I'm going to show you. Rising talent, so those high potential people, we recognize that they have a lot of potential. We can promote them at least 2 times in 2 years. We're going to start putting them in talent pools and maybe into succession planning. And then select individuals, we're going to do strategic moves around the company to get them what they need. Okay, an associate profile. You can see the big buckets here. We're looking at your strengths. We're looking at your big wins. We're looking at your development focus. What do you need to learn? How are we going to help you with that? Where are we at? And all of your performance appraisals are in here. This, when I was doing this, was actually like a card that we would hold up and look, but now it's all online in their HRIS system. But we build this profile for managers and above. We look at their performance and their potential. So performance is how you're currently doing in your role, and your potential is how you might do in other roles. And then we 9-box you. Okay, so this is called the 9-box model. It is not a static tool. We are constantly assessing employees on both their potential and their performance. And you can see along the bottom, are you well placed? Are you promotable? Or are you high potential? On up the side on performance, do you have issues? Are you meeting our expectations? Or are you stand out? So if you look through these boxes, and if you want to pause it for a minute to read through the buckets, that's probably not probably not a bad idea. But if you think about a really excellent CEO that's doing absolutely everything and everyone wants to be him, they're making top 500 list, their company's wildly successful, they're actually only going to be a 5, right? Because we can't promote them. They are at their top bucket. So a lot of people are like, why am I not a 1? I've actually had CEOs, why am I not a 1? Because we can't promote you. So you might just be a high performer at the max of where we think you need to be. Or you could be somebody that we see has a lot of potential, but you're not really good at your current job. Hopefully that's because you're new at your job and you just haven't ramped up, but it might be a poor fit. So we're always moving people around and we're trying to get them to the peak of their performance and their potential. What Rexnord did was plot it out and mapped what are the percentages. And this is where they fell, which this is actually fantastic. You don't want a lot of people in that bottom row because they're not performers and you can't keep dead weight. Yeah, there's ramp up time, but you need to ramp up quickly in today's world. So we really have a lot of people in those well-placed high performers, which is beautiful. We were really pleased when we saw this. And then that rising talent, yeah, it's about 20%. Not everybody can be a rock star or shooting star, and not everyone wants to be. So maybe you find that sweet spot. This is the job I love. I come to work every day. I'm good at it. I like it. And they're like, oh, we're going to promote you. And you're like, I have no interest in that. You look at your boss's job, or you look at maybe the next subject matter expert path, and you're like, I don't want that. I like this job. A lot of people, employees will self-limit, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And then we decide, are we going to put you in a succession plan, which again is that top 1 or 2 levels, or are we going to talent pool you? There are pros and cons to each strategy. If we do succession planning, it is very much that this person is going to go into this role and then go into this role, and it's very person centric. So if Trina leaves the company, the whole succession plan can fall apart. However, talent pooling, we see these 4 people have the right mix of skills, and we'll just keep kind of giving them, you're over here, so you need to see some of this. You're over here, you need to see some of this. And then we have options in case Trina leaves, or in case Bob decides he wants to spend more time coaching his kids' soccer team, whatever it is. Some companies are much more into succession planning because they really want you to know this job, and they have very strategic conversations with those people about, this is what we're thinking. What are your thoughts? You have to be careful here with implied contracts, but it works out pretty well for people. And then this was actually their talent matrix. This is what they put together, and it was based on their skill set and how they thought. Like red meant we don't have anybody that we feel confident in to take this place. We're in trouble if this person leaves. Green, we're very confident we can replace this person. Yellow, maybe. So they did succession planning and talent pooling. So they had some people that were very like they're already almost mentoring with them. And then other positions, maybe we're doing talent pooling and that sort of thing. Okay. This week's assignment is your performance appraisal. So here's what we want. An overview of them. Just remind me what the job is. Develop an annual performance evaluation form. Okay, some of you have really been struggling with your matrix and your objective, subjective components for this. I need to know how you're scoring people. Are you going to have all objective, which removes some of the potential human components, which can be problematic? Or are you going to have a mix? And it's okay to have some subjective things. As an example, a good subjective question is, what is a goal you'd like to accomplish for yourself over the next review period? And then you guys rank them on how well they did that. Or anything. I mean, you guys know what's subjective. It's pretty much anything that's opinion based. For your objective components, you're going to want a couple of tasks, competencies where you have built out how do you know if they're doing well. So for professor, one of my objective components might be how many classes I taught per quarter, averaged. So meets expectations is 4 classes per quarter. So maybe in fall I only had 3, but they were grad classes. This quarter I have 6. It doesn't matter. It's objective. I count up, you had 3, you had 5, you had 6, and there's the number. You exceeded expectations. And then I give that a score, a 4 or a 10 or whatever you want to score it for. But it needs to be very, what's your customer satisfaction number that I can just pull out of a system somewhere? Here's the number. How many days were you late? And that might, what's meeting expectations? You were never late. You were late once within 6 months. That's up to you. You decide. But you're going to put it in a form. Think Excel, think a table in Word, and you're going to have a couple of barriers, or a couple of boxes, not barriers. On your form, you need to have a place for them to acknowledge that they received it. Do they need to sign it? Do they need to sign it only if they agree with it? You're going to want to do some research in those materials I provided you last time and come up with a reasonable form. If you do a Google search, hold on, let's do a Google search. And then click on images. You can get an idea of how these forms are supposed to look. Employer, job title. I mean, you can get an idea. These all look good. And then the problem here would be satisfactory, adequate, needs improvement. And as you guys have heard from me before, this is still really subjective. So you would need to quantify that out unless this was your subjective component, if you had one. And then how does that form fit in a process? So what happens? You have it once a year, you have it once a quarter, you have it once every 6 months. Who looks at it? When do they look at it? Is it just the manager and the employee? Are you including some kind of peer review? When does HR look at it? So there are processes where the manager and HR puts together the evaluation form and then presents it to the employee, and they don't have a say in it. There are the ones I was talking about earlier where the employee puts it together, the manager puts it together, they compare it, then they send it to HR. Um, you just choose a model and you tell me who touches it, when, how often, that sort of thing. Number 4, how should goals be aligned? Okay. So at the bottom of your form, do you have a place for them to put a goal, a career plan, a path, something like that? And then put an example. So for my assistant professor role, you want to learn how to be a better teacher. Okay, so in the next 6 months, you're going to go to one conference or seminar on teaching methods. That's the goal. It has a date, it has an actionable, all those sorts of things. You're going to give me an example. You're going to go to a conference on how to teach and show that. Now, the last one, create a dispute process. So you give me my review and you tell me that I meet expectations and I think I'm an exemplary employee. What do I do? Do I just not sign the form, which is not a best practice? Do I sign the form and then write my comments and feedback? Who looks at it after does it go to HR and they decide to look at it? You need to have some kind of process that goes beyond your initial performance model. So maybe it just reroutes through the system. Maybe someone else gets involved. Maybe your manager's manager gets involved. You just explain that all to me. Make sure you're researching best practices because you're not experts, and show me why you think what you're doing is what is accurate. If you have any questions, I'm around. Send me an email or a text, and I look forward to reading these performance appraisal assignments. Thank you.